Again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Faith with Homer and Pip. Homer?
It hasn't changed. It's short and it's the best. Mother Teresa, when asked what her secret was, she said, "My secret is a very simple one. I pray. And if I ever find something better, I'll use it, but no luck so far."
I knew you were going to say something about that great saint, so I came across this and wanted to share it from St. Teresa of Calcutta. I know it's not always easy to love, but when you love till it hurts, there is no more hurt, but only more love. And I think our guest today knows something about that, and it will become evident as he shares his faith story. A marvelous, marvelous journalist, the sports world in Milwaukee. Homer and yours truly got to know him then. This is My Faith with Homer and Pip. Homer and the Holy Spirit have the idea. We hope and pray that it helps you on your spiritual journey to and through the cross of Christ. Again, Mark, a delight to have you with us, sir. Thank you. And
I'm honored.
as always, the man, he tees it up first. Go ahead, buddy.
I'm fascinated by my faith, Mark, but I'm also curious as much on how you choose to start. How do you want to start your story of my faith?
Well, thank you. And in having watched several of the podcasts in the past, there's been a tendency to start at the beginning of life. I'm going to start at a recent moment, and that moment happened last July. We got a phone call that the teenager we were raising, due to poor parenthood, 17-year-old Paige, was killed in a car crash. And she was in a car with three other girls, teenage girls, and apparently the police saw a defective headlight or tail light or something, flipped on their red lights. The young lady driving the car panicked and she hit the gas. She went about a half a mile where the road, you either had to turn right or left, and she was going at a speed that was not going to negotiate either. Flipped the car, hit a brick wall. My granddaughter died on impact. The driver died on the way to the hospital. A third passenger died 2 days later, and a fourth, my granddaughter's best friend, lives with significant physical and traumatic brain injury. That was really a test. And pardon me, it's one of those tests where you say to yourself, how could this happen? How could God let this happen? But I think it was our faith, both my wife and I, that flipped it pretty quickly to say, Paige is in a better place right now. She had significant mental health issues as a as a result of her growing up in a difficult environment, being likely sexually abused by a non-family member. And what we've took from the situation was she's now in a better place. All those traumas are erased, and she's with the angels. And people I think snicker when you say angels, but we believe in them. And that's really was a test of our faith, but it was, gentlemen, something that passed so quickly to she's in a better place, she's with God, she's with the angels. We're going to miss her, but we still love her.
How long did that process take? And any other thoughts you had prior to that?
The process of turning it into a positive, seconds. It really did take seconds. And I think part of this was Pip and Homer, the fact that my wife and I walked the path of raising her, difficult path when you're grandparents, when you're 50 years removed, together in lockstep. And we reached out to anyone and everyone that was offered in terms of help. You talk about prayer, and I, kind of given a working title of a book that I'm working on this situation, No Stone Unturned. We did not turn our back on any possible help that we could get for her. And the help is out there. There are such kind and good and professional people, but you have to make that move, and we did. So when the tragedy happened, neither of us could look at one another and say, "Well, if you had only," or "if we had only," and we just figured, she was in a better place.
I wonder if you thought just in this process, like this is plan number 800, or it never ends, or it's forever. All those were those thoughts that you dealt with in the entire process of working with your granddaughter.
Uh, you know, um, I had about a year after we started raising her, went to see a therapist, and I just, felt like I needed some help. I needed to work through some of the issues that Paige brought to us. I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing, and I wanted to make sure that I had my wife on the team. And we nicknamed ourselves Team Paige. And as people began to help her, we said, okay, you're officially now part of Team Page. Her high school, there were a half a dozen people there, including the receptionist at the front desk. I was in there every third day. And I said, you should laminate an ID card for me to walk around the school, instead of those labels that they print out. But um, this therapist said, after maybe a half a year, you ought to write a book, Mark. You've written some books in the past. You've got to write a book about grandparents raising grandchildren. And there's so little out there on this subject. And then Paige passed, and she said, now you don't have a choice. Now you have to incorporate both her as a living being and her as a spiritual being. And I'm doing that. It's not easy. It means reliving, but in that reliving, hopefully what I'm going to be able to do is help others in the same situation, and help them find help. I think two key words in this book are going to be get help. And the second set of words is going to be find peace. And we're trying very hard to live both.
I will defer to Pip in a second here, but I want to speak for humanity by saying you're not human. There's no way. There's no way you can recover from this that quickly and with the attitude that you have. You're not normal. You're something other than human. How do you respond to the amazement of what you've done and how you just looking at you, listening to you? That's not possible, but clearly it is.
I think it was a lifetime of and an upbringing of religion. I really do. And my parents sent me to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. I think you're surrounded by and touched by Catholicism in those two schools. But then you go to college, and I went to Marquette University, and what I found there was, yes, Catholicism is a religion, but there are others, and they're all pointing in the same direction, which is there's a higher being and there's a greater life ahead. And I turned to journalism as my career, but I found that the two fit perfectly together. If you're a good journalist, as you two have been, what you do is you're faced with a question, you do research, and then you go on the air, or you hit the typewriter in the days when I started my career. And I think in living that life and living it now in a different capacity, helping nonprofits move forward, you'd be inauthentic if you couldn't have that kind of attitude. So I think it's just living a life and professing that faith through action all the way through.
But you understand you're not normal. I mean, you understand this is
My
not
wife tells
normal.
yeah. Well, my wife tells me that every day. So
But people dream of this, and things happen like this, and they never recover. They fight it, and they have a faith. And how can God be so mean? My comment is often, it's part of God's plan, and I think, no, God needs a new planner. This
Yeah.
is, but you don't have any of that, or if you did, it's gone.
Yeah. I think it's, I think if you're going to live a life of faith, you'd be turning your back on that if you let those questions invade and pervade. And so I haven't thought, I've cried a lot, and but I look at it as good tears, and I'll cry many more times. So.
Pip?
Mark Sabljak is our guest on My Faith with Homer and Pip. With the Homer, I'm Tommy Pippins, and our producer is Brent Young. We couldn't do it without him, and we don't want to. Mark, I agree with Homer's assessment. Your faith is remarkable. It has been described as, paraphrasing a bit, that faith is being sure of what is hoped for and certain of what is unseen. Is this what keeps you going a day and a moment at a time?
I think absolutely. I mean, if we want to be literal, we we can't see faith unless we're seeing it in others and other human beings. There are times in our lives when something happens that just can't be explained. Um, my first grade school was St. Michael, which is in on 24th off of Elite Street in Milwaukee. And during my time there, they built an addition, a school addition. And part of the process was a statue of St. Michael the Archangel. And, there's hundreds of religious statues out there, but for some reason, that statue follows me. And, there's been other instances in my life where something wouldn't be possible without the right connections being made and some of them being made from above. So, I look at it and say, if you live this life long enough, you'd be foolish to turn your back on it. And it feels good living this way. Feels good trying to help through articles. And you've mentioned in many of your broadcast John Kerry, and John's been a friend of mine for decades and decades. When he was at the Mac Fund, he called me and said, a young man who was a runner at Marquette High School died of cancer. And it's a beautiful story, Mark. Would you be interested in telling it? And I did. And, John and I met maybe 2 weeks later. And as John is wont to do, he started to cry and thank me. About 3 months ago, I was at a meeting, and it was a round table type of thing. And there was a woman there who then came up to me afterwards and said, that was my brother you wrote about. Thank you. That was 40 years ago. And, I look back and say, I must have done something good. And, but, to me, it was another story to tell the way it should be told. And that story needed, love. It needed comfort. It needed a presence that I hoped I portrayed. And apparently, if the sister thought about it 40 years later, I must have done it.
Mark, how did
Now,
Paige? Go ahead, Homer.
no. Go. I can wait.
How did Paige change your life, your wife's life, and perhaps even her parents' life? You said something very special about apparently what a special young lady
Yeah.
she was and is.
Well, yeah, I think she was headstrong. I think her upbringing forced her to be stronger than most 17-year-olds are mentally. She had a clear path that she wanted to go on, and be damned if you were in her way.
Mm.
I think that the most touching moment, however, Well, there were two. One was we had a celebration of life. We didn't call it a funeral, call it a celebration of life. Paige was in the coffin. It was closed. Um, we had speaking parts for family members, her sister. All of them were wonderful. And then my son, who was the MC, said, "Does anybody else want to say anything?" And the room was half filled with teenagers, and we figured there'd be nothing. They wouldn't want to get up in front. Well, all of a sudden, a horde of them went up front. And one by one, they talked about how Paige had come to them at a moment where they were rock bottom. We heard rock bottom a couple of times, and she lifted them up. And, that was so surprising because she never bragged about that. She never told us about that. And then the second occasion was later that night. We had one of our first clients was Light the Hone Bridge. And we asked if the bridge could be lit to honor Paige. And my wife and I went down there, and there were a gang of teenagers. They were hugging, they were crying, they were coming up to us, hugging and crying. And it was like, this is beautiful. And, the sky is lit in her honor. And what a wonderful way to end a terrible day. So, those are some of the things that she left with us without the type of person she was. And knowing we loved her, I don't think that would have been possible.
You obviously, with your wife, you talk about Christ-like love. It's been said that love is willing the good of the other. That's what you did. You sacrificed. But yet I'm sensing that you would not trade the great blessing that Paige was when she was here, and obviously that connection as a spiritual being in heaven.
It was a lot tougher than I would have ever thought. But, you live through your own kids' teenage years, and they're going to be rough and tumble. There's going to be, moments of mistakes and uncertainty. Um, that doesn't necessarily prepare you for the second round. And, growing up today is so different than growing up 20 years ago when my kids were, of that teenage age. Social media is just an awful thing in many instances. And we had to learn as we went along all over again how it was to be. Essentially, we were her parents. We had to be. Her dad was in jail. Her mom was doing the best she could to bring her children back in her life. She started with the youngest. Paige would have been next, but we lived very close to the school where she went to high school. So we just had we didn't complain, we just did it. And again, whenever we hit a wall of some sort or a hurdle of some sort, we knew there were people out there, and we were unrelenting in getting to those people and getting their help. And I think that's what, helped us go through the whole thing. Would we do it again? Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Homer, go ahead. I know you've been holding on to a question.
No, I just want to know. Again, I think I speak for him. How did you become you? How do was it when you were young and you were exposed to a faith, or was it people that you met? I mean, you get to where you got to by some way or as a result of a number of things. This, I guess, would be going back to the beginning or at some point. Was it your upbringing? Was it your parents? What touched you to act the way and as you've become?
I think definitely upbringing. My dad was very involved with our parish. He gave of himself. There's no way you can miss something like that. And, when you look for a payback, when you're young, you expect it to be in dollars, but, he volunteered for the eighth grade basketball team. I was a terrible basketball player, so he suffered mightily. Um, and a parent teacher, etc. And then I think the role of a journalist really, as you two know, you have to make a choice pretty early on. And I sat across at the Milwaukee Journal sports department from somebody who took kind of the opposite tack that I did, and would make quotes up, would lie to people that he was interviewing, and it was a good test because he told me, "Hey, you do this and you'll get farther faster." And I just went, "No, this isn't going to work. I can't, I can't do it. And B, I don't want to do it. I don't want to, if that's success, I'll take my own course." So I think it was, you know, coupling my upbringing with my career, that those two went together beautifully. And what as I prepared for this podcast, I thought how little we talk about faith in the business community. I'm publisher of the Business Journal. If I heard religion brought up in a meeting once, maybe that was a lot. And I even wrote about a column about how, it seems to be more taboo to talk about faith than it is politics, which you shouldn't be talking about in the workplace. But I got no response to that column, and I think people were afraid. It's like I don't want to reach out. Um, in our current capacity, we've worked with Catholic organizations, we've worked with Jewish organizations, we've worked with America's Black Holocaust Museum. Light the Hone was with the younger generation. And what we found is, if you treat all the people the same way you're used to treating and being treated, hopefully, you'll be successful.
But you observed your dad. That didn't mean you had to be like your dad. You could have said, I don't know, I'm not going to do that. What what made you, or how did you respond, or what made you respond the way you did to what you observed?
I just think the authenticity that of my dad, and how people would talk about him when he wasn't around, and how they really talked about him and his loving capacity and his caring and his concern and his volunteerism. It's like, yeah, that's, if given a choice between the bad guys on Gunsmoke and the other TV shows I was watching, I think I like that. I think I'd like to be talked about that way. I think I'd like, to not be in the room and have somebody say, yeah, he done good.
And then to me, it becomes, I mean, you keep growing up, different things happen. Um, Now, my favorite one is to ask you, you meet somebody and you do talk faith, or you see they have a faith that's growing, and you have only 60 seconds. How are you going to fill those 60 seconds with the part that you think is most important to your faith, or them developing their faith? Or, what's at the top of the food chain for you if you're telling someone else about faith and your faith?
Well, I think it's gauging the temperature of their faith, and then trying to find a way to increase that temperature. And some of it is by pointing to people who are out there who care and can maybe help them. The young lady that was the survivor of the car crash, her mom is dealing with significant issues of trying to work with her daughter. And we've become a sounding board for her. We've reached out, my wife and I, to organizations we know could help. And, I like to think that that was being, that's an act of faith. And several weeks ago, she sent us a note. You've been more supportive of us than any of our family members. And I thought, okay, I guess we did something good.
Pip?
Mark, it seems as if you know that line in Romans where the Lord says he takes something bad and he turns it into good. And it seems as if Paige is living on and her spirit is touching everyone, and will in particular once you finish your amazing work, your book.
I think that's absolutely right. When people ask, how many grandchildren do you have? We have nine. That includes Paige. I'm not going to say eight because Paige will live on, and we're going to make sure of that. And I hope this book can help someone's, um, and help them help their young people in need. And that would be fulfilling to us. We may never know what happens, but my guess is it will.
Mhm. Is helping others, and again, a the goodness of God fashion living in you. Does that help you with this, what I assume is an ongoing healing process for the Sablejacks, Mark?
Absolutely. I think without addressing this, much like it was a story I was assigned, without researching, I think we'd be left in kind of a vacuum where it's difficult for people to talk to you about this situation. If they know you and they know what you're gone through, if they're very close, they're going to say something. If they're moderately close, it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to raise the specter of this. And so, it's between my wife and I. It's between my wife and I, and, thankfully, the eight grandchildren, five of which are 13 or younger.
Mm.
If anything, I've given the year 2025 to spending more time with the grandkids. Last weekend, we could have watched nine soccer, futsal, and basketball games. I think we got to six. So
Pretty
my
darn good.
yeah, I went to Dick's the other day and bought one of those chairs you put on a bleacher, and I bought my wife a pad to sit on because that's the way we spend our lives now, and I think the kids appreciate it, and we're there because Paige can't be. Um,
Mark, is this the message that really bent my ear, and the entire podcast has to this point? Um, we want to sweep it under the rug. We want to suffer privately. We don't want people to see us being vulnerable. But that vulnerability is a gift. Is this a message that you would share with others who perhaps have not been able to embrace the suffering and share it with the suffering of Christ as you have?
I don't think if I think if you don't embrace it, you can't get help. And because help can come from individuals you don't have any clue are able to help you. So I think trying to bottle it up and sweep it under a rug is just asking for mental turmoil and is almost anti-Christian. Um, I see people out there quietly living their faith. I see Pharisees, people, at the proverbial front pew, espousing their belief and then doing things that supposedly in the name of God are right, but are horrible. And I think you got to let it out. I mean, I think you gotta pray. I have a daily prayer book and I learn something new every day. There's not enough Mark in this prayer book, but I'll let that go. But I think anybody who hides this pain and suffering is just going to see it deepen. And I don't think God would like that.
I want to know, Mark, if not for the Page story, what would my faith with you have been? What would you have chosen to talk about if this had not occurred?
Yeah, I think I've been on the board of advisors of the Catholic Herald for 20 years. Um, I think it would be the volunteerism that I've lived through my life. It's led to recognitions and honors. My wife takes awards that I get and puts them in a box in the basement now, and which is fine by me. But I think it would be that you can help people. You can profess your faith by helping people in a very meaningful way by service and volunteerism, and don't expect it to be easy. You're going to put in hours. And then also, in your careers, live your faith. And I don't think there's a story that I've written that somebody would go back to and say that didn't sound very kind. That didn't sound very uh, that didn't sound like the Archangel Michael was hanging over you in that story. So I think I would talk that way about what I've done with my career, and then this next phase in the career of bringing together those individuals my partner and I met through our careers, professional careers, with nonprofits, and trying to uplift those nonprofits, whether they're, Karen Ellenbecker's Pillows with Wings, whether they're the Hone Bridge, which was two young men who are now leaders in our community. And then, reaching out for them to the Greg Marcuses, the Kurt Culvers, the David Lubars of the world. Making those connections has to be done authentically. And I think faith is part of that authentism.
If I was to ask you for names of people other than your dad who've wowed you in whatever they've done or however they've done it, um, does anybody or a couple people's names come to mind first?
Well, I'd say Cardinal Dolan. Um, I he came to when he was first named Bishop of Milwaukee, Archbishop of Milwaukee. He came into a Catholic Herald Advisory Group meeting and said, "I'd like to know why you individuals are around the table." And one by one, the individuals around the table said, "Well, I'm here because God's called me, or I've got these." And he got to me and I said, "It's simple. I want indulgences." And I said, I just want to go to heaven. So that's why I'm here." And then I got a Vatican II award, and you had a church service, and then you went next door at the cathedral, and they had cookies and punch. And I went up to him, I said, "Punch?" I said, "Where's the beer?" And he said, "In my trunk." So he was somebody that really impressed me. And a Father Wild at Marquette.
Well, wait, I want to get back to Dolan. Why or how did he impress you?
Well, I just thought he was a full range human being who was also, you know, close to God. And, he had a sense of humor. He could be serious and in problem solving. And, it's like, I think that's somebody that Jesus would have loved as a disciple. And so he impressed me. The Jesuits at Marquette, I always said, I don't know if the Jesuits are Catholic or not, but they have a strength that impresses you no matter what subject they're teaching. And um, I think along the way, I'd have to name, some of the Jesuits at Marquette.
All right.
You have prepared, Mark, as you have done all those years as a great sports writer, a great sports journalist, and I know you prepared for this segment. Is there something on your heart that you want to share that perhaps to this point anyway you haven't been asked?
Well, I think it's those two words, get help. and then use that help to help others. And it's very, I don't think there's anybody who in the next year of 2025 is not going to stumble upon someone that needs help. I think our first reaction is to hear the story and then go, ooh, and walk away. So I would say, you know, embrace where you can, get that person help when you can, be there, as painful as it might be to listen to the same story over and over again, but try to lead that individual towards faith and hope and help.
We know that God is love, and it's so gratifying to hear. And I personally thank you for sharing God's love, and you'll continue to do that with your book. What is it that you want parents raising grandkids to know about, or grandparents raising their grandchildren to be
Yeah,
aware?
as I've
Couple of
looked in, yeah, as I've looked into this, I've realized our daughter, our oldest, is adopted. That's and I've read some pieces about adoption, and frankly, I don't think society has treated adoption properly, and so that's, I think adoption fits underneath this umbrella. Foster kids fit under these umbrellas. And, there's other scenarios where aunts and uncles are raising, their kin. And I think what I want them to take out of this is that they're not alone. They're in a club. Maybe they didn't want to be in that club, but they, were faced with the decision of I either take this child or they go running. And that was our scenario. Paige was in a group home, and she just decided she did not belong there. So she'd run away every day. And we couldn't live with that. And so, this wasn't something that we led up to. This was, a momentary thing that she started running away. We're going to make a quick decision, and it was no decision at all. And I think again, the faith background that both my wife and I had made it easy. And so, use 2025 to listen and to respond. And that doesn't mean you have to give somebody a check for $1 million. Sometimes a phone call to someone who knows someone is going to be a lifesaver. With this young lady in the accident, I made a phone call to someone I had met through my life, and instantly she got some significant help. Simple, just a phone call.
Hmm,
So.
beautiful. May I ask, do you have any idea when the book is coming out? If you'll please give us the title again, and we would love permission from you to do a part two once it's out there.
Yeah, I think right now the working title is No Stone Unturned, because we honestly believe that when we saw an opportunity to get help, we went towards it. No idea when it'll come out. I would it's on a track, I think, to be finished by the third or fourth quarter of this year. But realizing how little has been done in this arena, I want to try to be comprehensive as I can be, and yet get it done within a short period of time. I will definitely keep you in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, and in God's time, as you say, there is no deadline. It's when you feel it in your heart and your spirit. Homer, anything else you want to ask Mark Sabljak?
No, I'm going to remember. Listen, I
Yes,
know I'm going
yes,
to remember. I'm going to
yeah.
remember a number of things still. Like you're just, I hope you know you're not normal. But other than that, it's going to be seems like what you want people to do in a large way, and very, it's just listen.
Well,
Listen
you,
helps.
you two are doing a wonderful thing and using, the platform that you have, and that takes a certain courage. And I want to thank you for lifting up the stories that are encouraging for others. So please continue. and I'm honored to be part of it.
And a great, great honor for us to have you. And I'm thinking, Homer, it's so neat, right? The way we know one another and then God makes these super connections. That's why I keep saying, Mark, I'm glad that Homer and the Holy Spirit got together and he said, Pip, we got to do this. I'm telling you, because people who have faith somehow navigate so many difficulties, tragedies with grace. And you're a prime example. And again, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You betcha. Well, for the Homer and for our producer, Brent Young, I'm Tom Pippins. Our featured guest has been Mark Sabljak. I knew it would happen. We knew it would happen. His faith share is going to inspire you and bless you, and we can't wait for Brent to get it posted in a couple of weeks or so. Thanks again, and look forward to reconnecting, Mark. God bless you and all that you do and your family. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Until that time, God bless you and keep you. Jesus is always in our midst.